Do you have a structure to your watch collection, an organization or strategy that guides your watch acquisitions? Join me on this episode of Adventures with Time as I reveal how thinning out my collection, sort of giving it a haircut, has driven me to the strategy I want to take my collecting activities in the foreseeable future. I'll describe this strategy, but more importantly, my path to this state in hopes that it will help other collectors, especially new collectors. I'll also show you the watches I've sold and why I sold them. Stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Adventures with Time. If you're new here, on this channel I chronicle my activities in watch collecting. After 3 years in this hobby, I think my approach to watches has evolved to where I have a set of guiding principles that help me in determining what watches I buy and that enables me to maximize the enjoyment I get from my collection. When I started collecting about 3 years ago, I had a plan that drove me to acquire many watches the first year and into the second year. I wanted my collection to include watches with different complications, different designs, and from different countries. Hence, at the beginning of 2020, I had about 20 watches in my collection. No, I'm not saying this was a bad strategy. I love how I was able to experience so many watches. I think as a new collector, this enabled me to determine what I like and what will retain my interest and enjoyment for the long term. I'm not suggesting this is for everyone. I'm just saying that this was good for me and may be appropriate for other collectors like you. Now let's get into it. I believe the root cause of my new strategy is the fact that I retired at the end of 2019. Not going to the office 5 days a week reduced my desire to rotate through many watches, or maybe it was just my growth as a collector. So what is this new strategy? It centers on structuring my collection into groups, 4 groupings of watches. First are those watches which I have great sentimental attachment, especially those watches were given to me for which I have great memories. I may not wear these often, but they will never leave my collection. The other 3 groupings constitute what I consider my daily wear watches, but I further break this down into 3 groups. And this may be too arbitrary for some people, but I find it helpful to think about my collection in this manner. It's a spin on the old marketing term, good, better, best. But for me, it's the beater, affordable, and best classifications. I consider the beater group as consisting of watches that are expendable. Watches that I don't really care what happens to them. Watches I'll throw away or give away rather than selling. The affordable group are watches that I like to wear on a daily basis. Watches that are driven by purpose, whether that purpose requires a chronograph, GMT function, or a diver. I can see flipping watches in this category to keep them fresh or to keep my interest in them fresh. The best group are my finest watches. Yes, you can equate that with the most expensive, but they may not necessarily be so. These are watches that I may also wear on a daily basis, but they represent the watches I want to keep in my collection for the long term. So how does this drive the progression of my collection? Well, in several ways. I believe it helps me manage the size of my collection. When considering a new watch, I can ask myself in which group would it fall, and should it or will it replace one of the existing watches I already have? This will hopefully keep me from growing my collection too big. Maybe adding to the existing count I have of 1 or 2 watches. For example, I'm considering another watch that I classify as a mid-tier luxury watch. You may have seen some of my recent videos where I survey the collections of certain watch brands. Well, I'm narrowing in on adding one to my best group. Or there might be a nice affordable watch that I think I want to try. There's going to be a constant desire on my part to try new watches. Hence the strategy to continually rotate watches through this affordable group in my collection. So how did I arrive at this strategy? As I said, it started in January when I determined I wanted to reduce the size of my collection. As I considered which watches I might eliminate, I realized they all fell into this group of affordable daily wear watches. That gave me the realization to group my collection. Let me now give you a quick review of which watches I sold and why I chose them for the haircut. The first watch I sold this year was the Ergon Maelstrom, a bronze diver with an asphalt black dial and black bezel. 40 millimeters with a Sellita SW200 movement, and I was getting a good accuracy with just plus 3 seconds a day. But I found this watch boring, very flat in appearance. So I decided it was going to be sold. Then there's the Melbourne Portsea, also a 40 millimeter watch, but this one in stainless steel, highly polished, with a triple date complication. It had a Miyota 9100, and I was getting about plus 8 seconds a day in accuracy. It was great for a work environment where business casual attire was used, but it doesn't fit into my new current lifestyle. So I decided this one was going. Then there was the Aviate, the P51 Mustang. This is a fairly big watch that has a design style based on the cockpit of a P51 Mustang, a World War II fighter airplane. Now I thought this was a really interesting design, but I quickly lost interest in this and wasn't wearing it that much. So this one went on the auction block. Similar to my Stratton Ligera, it used the Valjoux 7750 movement, where I was getting plus 4 seconds a day. It's a 42 millimeter stainless steel watch, but had that wedge-shaped case, where at the thick end, the bullhead end, it went up to 21 millimeters thick. This design was so different from any other watch I had. It had a colorful dial, but the distinctiveness of this watch began to wear on me. I found myself not wearing it much at all. Fourth up is my Squale 1521. This is the TGV limited edition watch. One of the first watches I purchased it, not so much for its relationship to TGV, more for the design and color aspects of this watch. It had a ETA 2824 that gave me plus 11 seconds a day in accuracy. 42 millimeters in stainless steel. I like Squale, and the color combinations of this blue dial with the red bezel was very striking to me. It had a very nice wrist presence, and I still enjoyed wearing this watch. But I must say that I enjoy the Islander yellow dial diver much better, and was wearing that instead of the Squale. Given that the Islander is 1/3 the price of that Squale, I decided to send the Squale to a new home and use the funds for another watch. Then there's the Hamilton Field Auto. Now you may have seen several videos I did in trying to find the best field watch for myself, and I had decided I wanted the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto. This watch is 40 millimeters, has an H10 movement, which is based on the ETA 2824. I chose the brown dial, which I thought represented the military history of field watches better than any other color. But I had to go to the gray market for this watch, since Hamilton had said that they were sold out of this watch and they weren't making any more. I'm not sure if this is true. I think this is a great looking field watch. The only reason I sold it is that I want to try some other field watches, as I mentioned in another video, something with direct military history. And that leads me to the final watch I sold, which perhaps was the hardest for me to decide. This is the Stoa Flieger Classic 40, another ETA 2824 movement that gave me plus 2 seconds a day in accuracy. It's also a 40 millimeter stainless steel watch. And yeah, I just did a 20-month retrospective of this watch on the wrist, and I really enjoyed it. But I wanted to reduce my collection a bit more, and I found that I wasn't wearing the Stoa as much as I would have liked to. So I decided to let this watch go. As with the Squale, I felt that the money I could get for this watch would add to the funds I needed for that next mid-tier luxury. So there you have it, the 7 watches that I sold. So where to now? Selling these 7 watches provided me with some funds to obtain that next mid-tier luxury watch. I have a feeling I might be purchasing that watch by the end of this year, so stay tuned for that. In fact, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so that you get alerted to whenever I publish a new video. And as always, I request that you provide any feedback you have in the comments below. Part of the enjoyment I get from creating this content is the exchange of ideas, insights, and simple camaraderie I get through the comments. Until my next video, I wish you well.